The revolution wasn't televised in the 60s. Is it going to be televised in the 90s?
Well, you know, the catchphrase, what that was all about, the revolution will not be televised, that was about the fact that the first change that takes place is in your mind. The thing that's going to change people is something that no one will ever be able to capture on film. It'll just be something that you see, and all of a sudden you realize, I'm on the wrong page.
Welcome back to Shed Talks, the series where we talk about different cultural phenomenon from a hopefully grounded perspective. The revolution will not be televised. This is a phrase coined by poet and musician Gil Scott Heron. He was talking about, at the time, in the early 1970s, the revolution is something that starts in the mind. In order to really feel it, you can't look to an external source. It has to come from an internal place. Taking it a bit further, I think you can safely say that the internal world where this revolution occurs is something we're all connected to through the collective unconscious, and that this is actually the source of all forms of art, of culture, of ideas that end up getting expressed. Relating to all this, 2030 seems to be an important date. Not only is it the end of this decade, it also lines up with this idea called generational theory.
This journey is going to last until about the year 2030, so we're not quite halfway through yet. Well, this is all part of a pattern, and it's a pattern that's gone back centuries in Anglo-American history. I think it frankly characterizes the history of many countries around the world today.
It's the idea that society has a 80 to 90 year cycle, and much like the seasons, there are 4 distinct turning points which characterize a different phase of the cycle. The first is an era of high industriousness. This is when society is kind of all collectively on the same page, where the future looks bright, where institutions are stable. This is often mapped to the 1950s. These are periods with a very identifiable mainstream culture that most people are on board with, and they're okay to be on board with it because society is prosperous. But then eventually people get tired of conforming, things maybe aren't as bright as they used to be, and people start questioning things. And that's when you get to the second turn, the awakening. It's a period characterized by social and societal upheaval. You can think of the 60s, the anti-war movement, the hippies, and even civil rights as being an awakening of sorts. People are questioning what society says is right and wrong, and they're starting to create their own vision for the future. As more and more people start waking up and following alternative lifestyles, it leads to the unraveling, which is where people have a very untrustworthy view of institutions, where things seem to be bifurcating, splitting off into different subsets, subcultures. People are following all kinds of different ideas, belief systems, and there is no cohesive mainstream culture. And finally, the fourth turning is a crisis. Now this, in American history, is categorized a lot by the 2008 financial crisis, a period when things economically are more unstable. There's a crisis of identity, a crisis of culture. Things are just falling apart. The old world is dying, and maybe the glimmers of a new one can be seen. Now, there are various dates for each of these eras mapped to American history. I mentioned some of them, but I think there is some room for interpretation. The main point is that culture goes through this ebb and flow, and occasionally there are periods of critical mass where there's a buildup of people wanting a change and a revolution occurs. Sometimes it's a bloody revolution, sometimes it's a cultural revolution, but nonetheless, after that point, things are completely different and there's no going back. Well, based on generational theory, we are approaching the end of this last crisis here in the 2020s, and the 2030s promise to bring about a new world, one that's driven by technology, by artificial intelligence, data sets, one where humans, expression, freedom, autonomy, even democracy, all these things might die along with the old world.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we're going to examine the human future. As we approach the year 2000, what are some of the novel features of our contemporary culture that are likely to become dominant in future society?
Find out in 30 years!
With me is Terence McKenna.
What these things seem to imply is that we are really sweeping toward the climax of a 1,000-year-old civilization, a civilization that began, I suppose you could say, with the rise of medieval scholasticism, which then transformed itself into proto-modern science, which then became modern science and then modern philosophy. We are really sweeping toward the culmination of the Western contribution to the story of mankind. And what will that contribution be? It could well be a devastating, species exterminating thermonuclear war, or it could be the culmination and completion of the ideals that we inherited from the Greeks. How we balance historical forces against the need to evolve consciousness is going to decide how the tale is told. And if you look at the things that I named, feminism, cybernetics, consciousness expansion, space flight, these are all different approaches toward the notion of expanding our frontiers organizationally, geographically, informationally, consciously. The expansion of frontiers is the very essence of a continuing human future, humane human future.
McKenna was a big influence on my life growing up. I would listen to his lectures, and I found a lot of what he said to be interesting because he came from this scientific background. So he was dealing in the realm of reason and mathematics with his own intuition, which he argued was how one should approach science, through intuition, not just through deduction. Which is what a lot of science is based on now. Testing something, testing it over and over and over again to try to get the same result so that you can determine what is. But an intuitive way of thinking is kind of like having a hypothesis and then experiencing it, testing it out. Instead of testing every individual thing, seeing the patterns where they emerge and not being blind to the fractal nature of the universe and of reality. And he viewed this as almost like a big cosmic test for the mycelium network, and that this experiment runs its course when humanity is at its final point of where it must decide, will we take the path of destruction, of destroying this world and never going back, or will we somehow become self-aware and humble enough to realize we have to take a different path. He says it'll be like a photo finish, whether or not humanity is good. And I think that pretty much sums up all of history, and especially where we are now, because it feels like this is the last turning point. It feels like AI and autonomous drones that can fly around the world and enact the will of any tyrannical government. Our 3D world is about to be consumed by this all-encompassing technology. And nature and trees and all that, I mean, maybe that'll go the route of Blade Runner or Mad Max. Water will become this rare and precious commodity that people are willing to fight and die for. And all these luxuries that we take for granted, roof over our heads, grocery store, the ability to move freely in a city or in a country, they will just be memories of a long lost era that once was. Associated with each of these 4 turning points, there are 4 archetypal figures that emerge. Maybe they're like the good guys. Out of the high comes the artists, who I think have the luxury or the optimism to dream up a brighter future, you could say. Out of the awakening stage comes the nomads. I guess they're sort of preparing for crisis, really. They see what's coming and they're sort of adapting their lifestyle. From the unraveling, we get heroes. These are the ones who lead people through the crisis. And then out of the crisis, we get prophets who lead us to the next awakening. You can certainly see a pattern in the zeitgeist, in these collective ideas that gain popularity. And it's not just random which ideas, which memes, which types of music or forms of expression become widely adopted when they do. It's a representation of the will of the people. I feel like that's the role of the artist, to envision that. Somebody like Terence McKenna is a prophet. He saw the crises unfolding in his lifetime. The environmental catastrophes, endless wars, the wasted resources, the needless division, all these things have continued and have transformed into this digital age, this globalized age. This is also something you can experience today or tomorrow or maybe halfway through your life, but people go through crises. People go through small ones, they go through big ones. Anytime I've had what was close to a panic attack, maybe that was a small crisis. Whenever I've had, real issues with my life or maybe tragic events with family and friends, that's a crisis as well. We all go through these things. And on some level, we all know that to be a better person, to be good, on some basic level just means to learn from these experiences, to do things in a way that avoids the crisis or minimizes the crisis next time. And if you've had enough life experiences, if you've talked with enough people, been in enough situations, there's definitely been opportunities to be a hero, to be an artist, to be a prophet. Again, these are roles that we either all live in or go through phases of in our lives. It's not going to come to you in a YouTube video or a show or a news broadcast. It has to start from inside of you, from your mind, from your experiences, from the cycles that you've gone through, from the hero's journey you've undergone. I think that's maybe a message I've been trying to tell with my channel for the past 4 to 5 years, often getting lost in translation. The revolution will not be televised. Look, we got about 4.5 years until we cross that finish line. Who's gonna get first? Is it gonna be the devil on your shoulder or the angel? Is it gonna be the good or the bad? Who knows? It's gonna be a photo finish. Thanks for watching. Peace.